Good afternoon. I hope that you are here and not tired too much for this very good afternoon. So my greetings to you and my appreciation to organizers who invited us to this conference. Yesterday we had a common presentation together with Professor Ilya, and also we have now two lectures, one after each other, so you will have a good review of cannabis with its medical properties, with its efficiency and safety profile. I would like to continue my lecture that I began yesterday with introduction myself as a clinical psychiatrist and a clinical neuropsychiatrist and a specialist in psychiatry, and I worked for neuropsychiatry and neuropharmacology. I was a research psychiatrist and a neuropsychiatrist. But now I would like to present you a more specific issue with some disorders. We will speak about the role of cannabinoids in treatment of various neurodegenerative and neuroinflammatory neurological disorders. I will review some schizophrenia, some neuropsychiatric disorders, more psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia and post-trauma, and we will try to discuss these issues. First of all, I would like to say that I am a private physician and I have some income from any other parties. I would like to refer you to brand new event that happened just 5 days ago. 5 days ago, the best journal, best magazine that existed in the world, Nature, published the whole issue about the cannabis. This is a major event in our science. It's happened 5 days ago. So now we must say that cannabis in the mainstream, cannabis and its properties in the mainstream of as a major scientist's achievement. So I would like to refer to this issue of a Nature Outlook. It's free of charge, available online, and you are invited to visit their website. They have all these papers from Nature Outlook available free for all readers. My pleasure to introduce you to this issue and to say that they have some review. They published this review in this brand new issue. They say the Cannabis in Neurology reported review. Well, I would like to say that this is good review of the potency of cannabinoids for various disorders. Mostly they are speaking about multiple sclerosis, the role of cannabis in reducing the symptoms of multiple sclerosis. I would like you to refer back to issue, and you see that the sign of GW that was a major sponsor for this issue. So you should understand that it will never come without great grant, great support that came from pharmaceutical industry based on cannabis. It's also the brand new event in the history, where the pharmaceutical companies are based on natural medicine, natural cannabis, and they are began to support major publishing and major research. So we are looking now. We are now living in transitional period where the big pharma are being beaten by big cannabis, and this is the first obvious event that I could emphasize. That GW published just sponsored this issue. They did not publish something else, but they entered this. Publication saying that only Sativex, their production, could be effective for reducing symptoms of multiple sclerosis. And we know that it's not exactly like this. Sativex is very good medicine, but we know that it is not effective for majority of the patients. For some patients it's not effective, but for some patients could be treated very successfully, like you know the story from this guy who provided you with great level of disclosure, his history, without any side effects. So we should distinguish between things. The next issue, about 1 year ago, we have another major review of cannabinoids and their role in the selected neurological disorder. This is a statement paper of American Academy of Neurology. So all the neurologists in the United States and in English-speaking countries are recruited to read this review and to behave accordingly to these conclusions they provided. They say that cannabis could be useful for neurological disorders, but should be used with very, very high level of precautions. So this is a state of art in the area of neurological disorders, where official medicine is recognized the role of cannabis, the role of various cannabinoids, natural one, semi-natural like Sativex, so it's cannabis-based pharmaceutical production, etc. So we are seeing the process where the cannabis is entering slowly but steadily to the mainstream of official medicine. Like this is an example of neurology and neurological disorder. We would like to speak more about different other neurological disorders. We have some neurological disorders based on neuroinflammation, such as multiple sclerosis, and other disorders based on neurodegenerative processes, like Parkinson disease, Alzheimer disease, etc. Let's speak about them because we have a lot of patients that could not be treated successfully with conventional medication, so they eagerly look for different kind of medication, and they can. Some of them just come to us and say, "Please, could you try us with cannabis?" And we had a great question: if could it help them? Probably it could harm them. It is a big issue. You know that neuroinflammation plays a significant role in all neurodegenerative process. Such disorders like Alzheimer, Huntington disease, Parkinson disorder, they could be treated with cannabis. And I would like to say my great appreciation to Professor Hanush, because he already introduced you to this issue. We suppose that cannabis could treat these disorders with great success. Unfortunately, we could not cure them. This is a difference between curation and treatment. We are really able to treat all these disorders with various cannabinoids products. We unfortunately are not able to cure them, as well as with other conventional medications. The role of cannabinoids based on CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors, you had enough information about two of them, and I would like to emphasize the role of CB2 receptors in various neurological disorders, because the widespreading of CB2 receptors in immune system, which is responsible for inflammation processes in the body and immune processes in the body. Well, now this is a time to say what we can observe from our trials. Half a year ago, it was published in the very good neurological paper, journal, Movement Disorders, that already we should recognize strictly success to treat Parkinson's disease and some cases of Huntington disease with cannabinoids. The success is reached for tics, and some benefit for tremor in multiple sclerosis, and in dyskinesia and motor symptoms in Parkinson's disease. So now it is all. You should understand that for conventional neurologists, the things I present you are brand new. No one of them were educated to use cannabis in his practice. Now they should read it and to be very, very surprised that the substance they were educated to hate it, now they just advise to use it. And none of them know how to do it. It's unfortunately, it was our great mistake to take it out of pharmacopoeia for 80 years. And now neurologists that used it for Parkinson's disorder in the beginning of the last century, they just forgot how to do it now. And we need to reintroduce it for clinical practice. And this is major neurological review, bring you this knowledge and ask and even advise neurologists to consider cannabis treated as a available and legitimate treatment for movement disorders. Now I would like to speak about Tourette disorder. Tourette disorder is a quite frequent disorder, movement disorder that affects and children and adults in the same measure, and we unfortunately do not have some treated agents for this. Our medications are based on antipsychotic and some neurological medications try to alleviate symptoms. They suffer from motor symptoms, from motor tics, from vocal tics. The quality of life is usually reduced. You know what the spectrum of Tourette syndrome? Tourette syndrome is not only neurological disorder. It's a wide spectrum of different other symptoms existing in such patients, such as obsessive-compulsive symptoms, mood disorder, mood swings, executive dysfunction, etc., etc. So, under Tourette disorder, we have a high palette of various symptoms, and we need to treat all of them together. And this is, it was an idea, why not to try to treat it with cannabis. I will try to show you this movie, if I will succeed to connect, but I will make another attempt. I will refer you, instead to trying to in vain, I refer you to look for cannabis and Tourette in YouTube. You will see a short film, showing one Deutsch guy, young man. He is German speaking. I'm not sure he's from Germany or from Austria, but he is a German speaking man. And he shows how cannabis treating his Tourette symptoms. You could observe the effect or just online. And this is probably best teaching movie, best teaching film I ever saw in YouTube. It's unprofessional. It's open for everybody. I just advise you to visit YouTube and to see this film about this guy who was treated successfully. Sure, as a self-treatment in first, now he already obtained his license for his medical cannabis, but just you could observe the effect is coming immediately. Within 1 or 2 minutes, you see diminishing of his tics. What other benefits of cannabis we could observe for Tourette symptoms? We could observe decreasing frequency of tics. It happens immediately. It does not take a time like it's needed for antipsychotic medications. It reduces obsessive-compulsive symptoms, very bothering. It increases effectiveness of conventional medication. Also, it promotes sleep, using as an anxiolytic agent, and reduce aggression to such patients, because such patients are very irritated. The threshold of the threshold is very, very low. They have no patience at all, and some of them sometimes very aggressive. Cannabis reduces their aggression, reduces their tension, irritability. It's very effective medicine for Tourette syndrome. What about other neurological disorders, like Alzheimer? Let's think together what the role it could play for treatment Alzheimer. What kind of medication it could provide for? Because you know, this age, the population of Europe is aging, and the problem with Alzheimer probably is a problem of each household in Europe. I'm sure that everyone from you know people from suffering from Alzheimer's disorder. We need to try to help them. Unfortunately, we do not have efficient medication in our armamentarium of conventional medication. So let's see how cannabis could help such patients. I would like to remind the slides you saw yesterday. Professor Luber Hanush told you about our project. We had in Israel, we had a project for from 3 to 5 years. We call this project Hashish to Kashish. Hashish to Kashish, and this is a program was sponsored by one of our growers, Tikkun Olam, to provide one patient suffering. They were in nursery, one single nursery home in Israel used cannabis for nursing patients, and we gave them on the regulatory basis. I was a neuropsychiatrist who was in charge for this program and follow up these patients together with geriatrics on this from this nursing home. And we observed the greatest effect for such patients. We just did not believe how they improve the quality of their life. As a being treating psychiatrist for them, I reduced almost all sedative medication for them. Absolutely all antipsychotic medication. They just did not need it. The geriatric physician who worked with me reduced majority of the antihypertensive and anti-glucose medication because they balance of glucose was very good. Majority of them suffer from diabetic mellitus type 2, non-insulin dependent diabetes. None of them were needed to use anti-diabetic medications, and the majority were able to reduce the level of antihypertensive drugs. So we reduced 90% other medications that this patient consumed. It was greater success with high success for the quality of their life. We just observed it and we tried to publish it. Unfortunately, research journals do not want to publish such papers saying this is an anecdotal case series study. Anecdotal case series study coming from 60 patients for long-term follow-up up to 3 years. Unfortunately, this program was closed now because our Ministry of Health demanded to build special room for storage of cannabis because we had about between half and a kilo of dried marijuana on the place, and it's supposed to be not safe because the criminals could store it, and they demanded to build this room, and nursing home refused, and this is why we just stopped this program. But I personally observed, and me and other workers, nurses and doctors observed a clear effect of cannabis for crippled, disabled, Alzheimer patients. We did not cure them. We helped them, we improved the quality of their lives. In my opinion, it's enough. What about other neuropsychiatric disorders? Let's speak about schizophrenia and all myths and what is happening together with cannabis and schizophrenia. The relation between cannabis and schizophrenia are complicated. And cannabis was accused for new cases of schizophrenia. It was blamed to increase incidence of schizophrenia among young people. It is a very serious accusation, and it was a major. It is a major reason that cannabis is placed out of law in majority of the countries, and we need to speak about and think about it correctly. Majority of the studies we know that high THC content could produce psychotic, disruptive thinking and psychotic episode. But we suppose that it's happening only in vulnerable people that already have some predisposition, genetic or different other predisposition to develop psychotic from different origin. We just need to be very, very selective in choosing patients to permanent cannabis therapy. So this is a very important point, because you know that incidence of cannabis use in Western countries increased many times, about 90% increasing during the last 30 years. However, we have statistics for schizophrenia for last 100 years, about 100 years. We have a good statistic for schizophrenia incidence in the same countries. The incidence remains the same. So increasing the incidence of cannabis use, even heavy use, even in adolescents, it is not a reason for increasing of level of schizophrenia patients population. It's just simple figures coming from statistical research. But we need to put into consideration to whom we could advise and to whom we should not prevent, but advise them not to use cannabis. We already had a lecture of Professor Hanush saying that for adolescent brain, teenager brain is very vulnerable because it is maturing brain. And this is why we should prevent this brain from many different substances, and cannabis also. Mostly from cannabis coming from natural and mostly from synthetic compounds like nice guy, like spice, etc. Because synthetic cannabinoids also contain many different toxic agents, and we could not we explain majority of the psychotic episodes because of this toxicity, not also because plant cannabis influence the brain. We know that exposure of cannabis in adolescents only associated with psychotic when it was given in high doses for a long time for teenagers or adolescents who had some genetic or family inheritance, some predisposition, and were particularly vulnerable. We could explain it because could be triggered, psychotic could be triggered by high doses of CBD or of THC given for the long term in high doses. Also, we know that the effects of other cannabinoids, such as CBD, could be therapeutic for such patients. You had a wonderful slides of Professor Hanush explaining that even giving CBD in small amount, in small dosage, like 1 milligram a gram, so for average teenagers, 50 grams a day, it's very good antipsychotic properties. I know, I'm aware about one study that I could not provide you the slide about it because it was not published. I just had a raw material. It was done in the Institute of Psychiatry in London, where they gave to healthy volunteers, they gave THC IV, intravenous, high doses of THC, inducing psychosis for the young volunteers, and gave them CBD previously in order to reduce psychotic symptoms. CBD was able to prevent psychotic symptoms in almost all such students. I consider this study is unethical. It could be not done in Israel, but in England they have the different ethical rules, and they cause psychosis for young students just for scientific curiosity. I suppose it's just unethical, but they try to prevent this psychosis, giving them CBD, high CBD content. They were able to prevent, but 15% of students remain psychotic just after experiment. So we need to be very careful and very cautious making such sometimes dangerous experiments with cannabinoids. I was happy to provide you 2 recent reviews published on schizophrenia, and they just appeared now in this year, saying this is a great interest in scientific community to cannabinoids as a treatment agents for schizophrenia. So we could suppose that many companies already are trying to develop many compounds as a medicine in order to provide it as a feasible treatment for psychosis, and cannabidiol is one of them. I would like to tell you more about my own experience treating my patients with post-traumatic stress disorder with cannabis. My post-traumatic stress disorder patients were the major reason to transfer me from biological psychiatry to cannabinoid medicine. They just convinced me to listen to them and to believe them that they found their medicine, and they use cannabis not only for abusive purposes, they just use it as a self-relief, self-treatment for difficult post-traumatic reminiscence, flashbacks, and other very heavy symptoms. Unfortunately, in conventional medicine, we do not have effective medicine for post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is supposed to be one of the worst psychiatric disorder ever existing, because it could happen in everybody, just in everybody. Nobody proved from this disorder. And now American Veteran Administration makes a long-term trial looking for all soldiers sending to Iraq or Afghanistan, and they try to evaluate how many soldiers will develop post-traumatic stress disorder being exposed to military conflict. And they suppose that about from 10 to 15% of soldiers will have significant post-traumatic symptoms after even 2 months of constant combat activity. So, and we do not have effective medicine for them. And the majority of them use, some of them use cannabis as a symptomatic symptomatic agent. No studies existing now for treatment post-traumatic stress disorder with cannabis. When I began my study, it was just an empirical study, naturalistic, observational study, coming from my practice as a clinical practitioner. When I published this paper, I didn't even found some papers for introduction. Very few of them you see here, but no one of them looked on the quality of their life. So the protocol of our study was very simple. The aim was very clear. Try to understand to which post-traumatic stress disorder patient we should recommend cannabis and to whom it could help. As a part of my routine clinical work, I refer to our Ministry of Health more than 200 applications for my post-traumatic stress disorder patients. Unfortunately, only half of them were given the license. I divided all post-traumatic stress disorder patients on 3 groups. The first group had only post-traumatic stress symptoms and did not suffer from depression or a pain disorder. But majority of them suffered with concomitant depression and pain disorder. About this group, majority of them were Israeli veterans. Some of them suffered from motor vehicle accidents, and I had a group of women who were raped and developed a post-trauma because of this event. For example, majority of the pure, so-called pure PTSD were women who were raped. They did not suffer from depression or pain. They just could not leave their houses for months and years, just seclude themselves in their homes, and they were frightened to go out. They did not suffer from depression. They just were closed in their room and suffered from severe disorder with no functioning at all. This is a description of group. I used a clinical administered CAPS, we call this CAPS, clinical administered post-traumatic scale, quality of life, and I asked my patients to describe the changes in their life under the cannabis. As I already told you, only 50% of my patients were granted cannabis license for unknown reason. This is the position of our Minister of Health to control physicians who recommend regularly cannabis. Just this is a game. We call it gambling, 50-50. When I submit my recommendation to somebody, to Minister of Health, to ask him to grant him license for cannabis, this is a pure gamble because they grant only 50%, they satisfy only 50% of our recommendations for unknown reason. And they do not want to discuss with us why. And I follow up my patients for the long-term period. Now I have 7 years of long-term follow-up, but here I describe the results of three first years of follow-up of such patients. Medical cannabis was provided them by 7 or 8 different growers, and majority of them they have cannabis sativa because those years we usually did not have indica and they among the strains in Israel. Smoked cannabis was given them in the dosage between 1 to 3 grams a day, and the content of THC in this cannabis was about around 20%. Majority of these patients also remained used medication when on the beginning of the study, and I asked very carefully them to count their pills during using of cannabis, not to throw it out, not to have sudden withdrawal from medication, just to begin to reduce slowly and very gradually all the psychiatric medication in this group. And there are results. During the 3 years of continuous cannabis treatment, we achieved, in majority of the patients, they achieved a strongly improvement of the quality of their life, and the clinical global impression was very good. But the results were not the same in all groups. The groups where explicit the majority of the success was the 2 groups. The first group, it was a group with post-trauma and chronic pain. Another also group with post-trauma and depression. So these groups of post-traumatic stress disorder patients that will exhibit very great success with medical cannabis. I advise for all post-traumatic patients with depression and with chronic pain to try cannabis together with their medication. Gradually, we were able to reduce majority of their medication. I will say about this later. In the group of pure PTSD, the results were also good. We had some improvement, but not so strict like in 2 other groups. So cannabis could be advised for them also, but should be explained that they should not expect great improvement and the results could be moderate. So majority of my patients discontinued or stopped all medication during 3 years. They just did not need it, not more. And they continue to improve without any kind of psychiatric medication. When I first time presented this paper, people from different countries, Germany and Holland, from the offices of medical cannabis, asked me to provide them this paper because they would like to prove it for genuine insurance. Because cannabis is a very expensive medication, and they would like to convince healthcare insurance to subsidize cannabis for such patients, saying if they reduced the level of their medication, the cost of the medication is 0. just would like, please compensate the cannabis. This is a very good way, and now in our Parliament Committee for Cannabis Regulation, where I am an advisor and observer, we are trying to change our legislation, saying that the patients who will use cannabis and stop their medication without problem, they should be compensated for the cannabis. It will allow them to have cannabis free, absolutely free, with very good quality for the long time. This is our way to help our patients to reduce costs for them and for healthcare insurance, because all kind of psychiatric medications are very expensive drugs, very expensive. So we will allow to have reducing of cost expenditures for healthcare such patients, providing them natural cannabis instead of pharmaceutical pills. But this is a plan, and I'm trying to convince our legislators to change current regulation. The majority of the patients, they continue to have some symptoms, but the quality of life was so improved, the majority just try to go to work. They feel that they are not staying together with post-trauma. Now they have more higher horizons in their life. So my conclusion from post-trauma saying that we should continue researching this need. This is a not easy question, because it is very difficult to make head-to-head study with cannabis and any other medication. I was not able to find any pharmaceutical company who will agree to put head-to-head their medicine together with cannabis. They already have their business. They don't want to put their medication at risk. No one is able, and no one of them are ready to fund this study. So we need more studies in different countries, with different kind of patients, with different strains of cannabis. And I strongly encourage you to ask your physician to make more studies, even like this. Even this is a naturalistic observational study, simple one, just saying if it's helpful for our patients in the real world, because my patient has many other disorders, but we need to know how it's helped and to whom it helped better. I would like to say that cannabis is going to be part of the mainstream. The way is long, but we are on the process. The major obstacles is the lack of knowledge, continuous mystification and demonization of cannabis among medical community and among ordinary people. We just need to find this false belief and false myth and try to find out to whom of our patients it should be helpful and to which extent. So we need to educate our patients, to educate family members, to educate doctors and all healthcare practitioners to believe that cannabis could be a legitimate part of treatment. I remind you this picture from brand new Nature. Maybe this is one of the first words saying that we are on the way to bring cannabis back to the mainstream of medical treatment. I would like to provide you the final slide and the saying of chief editor of Nature, saying that this could be and should be part of the legitimate treatment for all our patients. And now jurisdiction heading towards a full legalization, but we need to know to whom it should be given, how it should be given, and why it should be given. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions?
Yeah, I would have one just for Parkinson patient, how I can help him with cannabis. Should he eat it? Should he take oil? What do you think?
Usually Parkinson's patients suffer from Parkinson. They are elderly patients, I do not believe you will find them smoking. If they have no smoking as the usual habits, I mean smoking tobacco. If they do not have such habit, you could not convince them to use smoking. Probably you could convince them to use cannabis as an inhaled substance through the vaporizing. This is my strong advice, to go through evaporizing. Second option is a suppository.
Just eating or?
About edibles, you remember the lecture of Professor Hanush saying that edibles have a long way to use. Parkinson patients have symptoms, we call them on-off symptoms. You know, switch on and off. This is a special sign of Parkinson's disease. For them, being off is being out of movement. And for edibles, it's taking time for edibles to work. I suggest inhalation as a most efficient most efficient way of administration of cannabis, reducing these off periods. Edibles and oil, it takes a time because of the first liver bypass. So, suppositoria for the 8 hours and inhalation through vaporizing 2-3 times a day. This is my recommendation for Parkinson patients.
Okay, thank you for your advice.
Yes, please. Yes.
Can you tell us more about the potential for treating depression and some types of anxiety?
Thank you for good question. But you see, the cannabis is a natural substance that could be anxiety provoking and could treat anxiety. So we don't have any research, good research in this field. One of the first indication that indicated in about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, to prescribe cannabis was one of the first patients who had cannabis in the Western Hemisphere, in Europe, was Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria was prescribed cannabis for 3 indications. First, anxiety, second, premenstrual symptoms, and third, migraine pain. For all of them, the very good effect was described. So, we could prescribe cannabis as an anxiolytic substance only for them, for such patients for whom it's suitable. For example, post-traumatic stress disorder considered to be anxiety disorder, because anxiety constitutes a large part of this disease. My patients were prescribed cannabis sativa with high THC content. I didn't see any kind of anxiety provoking in them, but you should remember all of them used cannabis before being placed on official license. So they found their medicine already. So I did not work with population that never used it. So for cannabis naive people who never treated, you should be very cautious giving them cannabis with high THC content. For some of them, it could be really anxiety provoking. But they will say you, after 1 or 2 uses, they will say, no, it makes me agitation, it makes me irritability. You could reduce dose. And even if in reduced dose, the same is happening, so anxiety and irritation, you probably should consider different kind of treatment. Not all patients are suitable for cannabis.
Sehr klein. Ja, wir haben ja probeweise einen Steckeln abgeschnitten.